having a 2.5-year-old are close to being like a child than they are to my older daughter. Okay, I guess we'll try to get started, just so I can keep everyone on time. All right, so good morning, esteemed guests, faculty, and students. My name is Marcus Faustin. I'm the director or co-director of the Synthetic Biology Manufacturing of Advanced Material Research Center, or what we're calling SMARC. I hope everyone had a great breakfast and ready to have like an intriguing day. It's my great pleasure, along with the leadership of our center, with Guy Jenin and Fuzhong Zhang, to kick off the official launch of SMARC. This initiative is a significant step forward in our commitment to innovation and excellence at the intersection of synthetic biology and material science. I have the honor of introducing our first two speakers. Two figures that are pivotal in our academic and research landscape at WashU. So join me in welcoming our provost, Beverly Winland, and our dean, Erin Bobick. Their leadership and vision is instrumental in shaping the environment for innovative research here. And we'll first hear from the provost.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. Let's do that again. Good morning. All right. I am so happy to be here to help officially launch the Synthetic Biology Manufacturing of Advanced Materials Research Center, or more concisely, SMARC. I also was told that some people call it SMARCus, which I love. All right, so on my walk over to Whitaker this morning, I admit I couldn't help but noticing a student or two depositing a bottle or a container of various kinds into our recycling receptacles on campus. And I love that WashU prides itself on its commitment to being sustainable and responsible stewards of our environment. We have come a long way in that regard. But as the people in this room know, while doing our part to recycle is important, it is not a solution to the very real problem of plastic waste. Despite our efforts to repurpose, reuse, and recycle, most plastic produced in the world ends up in landfills or in the oceans. This has catastrophic effects on our environment, the ecosystem, and the economy. It would indeed be fantastic to dream of a time when we wouldn't have to think so much about our reliance on single-use plastics, or what can be recycled, or what can't. Well, our SMARC scholars are not simply dreaming this time. They are transforming innovative research into real environmental solutions that can make that dream a reality. The center's vision is to combat plastic waste by creating a circular bioplastic economy that eliminates environmental pollution from non-biodegradable plastics. The SMARC researchers are leveraging synthetic biology and advanced materials to foster the design and manufacture of sustainable bio-derived materials. These novel biodegradable materials could eventually replace our reliance on traditional petroleum-based plastic. So as a biologist, I find this work extremely exciting. As a citizen and a consumer, I find it extremely encouraging. It is the kind of transformative research that has the potential for worldwide environmental impact. SMARC's vision exemplifies what we are championing at Washington University's Here and Next strategic plan and our Center for the Environment Initiative, which aims to drive environmental research that generates transformative solutions to our deepest societal challenges. Our environmental center is bringing together the unique strengths and resources that we have at WashU to address an unmet need and to meet a global challenge. Its interdisciplinary collaborations are merging insights from engineering, biology, social sciences, and beyond. So SMARC is also building key strategic partnerships with industry leaders, governmental bodies, and other academic institutions to fast track the application of its research and forge a path to a sustainable bio-based economy. And along the way, the center is committed to educating and training the next generation of scholars and experts to ensure continued momentum and impact. So I want to congratulate SMARC's co-directors, Marcus Foston, Associate Professor of Energy, Environmental, and Chemical Engineering, and Fuzhang Zhang, Professor of Energy, Environmental, and Chemical Engineering, on this endeavor. Congratulations. And as well, I'd also like to acknowledge all of their colleagues that are joining this exceptional effort. It is inspiring to think about what you can accomplish together and the impact that this work can have on our world. So I'd like now to invite Aaron Bobick, Dean of the McKelvey School of Engineering, to say a few words. Aaron has been a key advocate and supporter of SMARC, and his leadership and vision have been instrumental in catalyzing its ambitious goals. Dean Bobick.
Thank you, Beverly. And thank you for being here. As most of you know, it's a challenging time in America to be provost at a elite university. And so she has just a few things on her plate today. So taking time out for us, we really appreciate it. I don't know about the rest. When I was a kid, one of my favorite television shows was Get Smart. I don't know if people know that. Those of you who can't remember Get Smart, if you ever heard the phrase cone of silence, that's the show that it came from. It was kind of this campy thing. And I'm almost certain that the villain organization was called SMARC. Anyway, so Beverly sort of spoke about the context at large. So let me focus in a little bit here. My background is actually in AI, computer vision. And because of a sort of random walk of my career, this is actually the first engineering job I've ever had. So I got here and I figured I better learn something about engineering. So I started attending some of the talks. And one of the first talks I went to was by this assistant professor, Fuzhang Zhang, who's giving this talk about creating circuits within microbes. Okay, so I thought, okay, this is pretty cool. I have a bit of a double E background, so I understand circuits. I had no idea that you could use essentially genetic modification or alignment in order to be able to achieve certain types of what you might think of as circuits. I later found out they're not really circuits. They're just basically chains of things that happen. But it was clear that the goal was in order to get these cells to do your bidding. And then I found out he was not a biomedical engineer, right? He's in our Department of Energy, Environmental, and Chemical Engineering. So for those of us who had only a casual passing knowledge of what chemical engineering was, it usually involved really big things under high pressure, lots of temperature. And if you're not careful, pipes would blow up. And this is what chemical engineering was all about. And then I get here and I see that leading the way in what we're doing in chemical engineering is a whole bunch of stuff focused on biology. Fast forward 8 years. So just this past February, I organized and then hosted a session on the bioeconomy at the Engineering Dean's Institute Public Policy Colloquium in Washington, D.C. And we had some folks speaking, some who came from OSTP and some other folks, colleagues from Iowa State, Robert Brown, who's Iowa State's here, but Robert's not here. And we were talking about different aspects of essentially how you want to have a circular economy, biological processes in order to make stuff of all sorts. Robert even had this weird DARPA proposal. I don't know if it was actually a project or not, or just a proposal where the idea was you have a truck with a device in the back, machine in the back, that's powered by renewable electricity. And in went plastic waste and out came food, right? Because at the end of the day, and this, remember, I don't know anything about chemistry. At the end of the day, it's carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, all right? And basically you have to break some bonds and remake some bonds. And as Beverly said, catalysis is a key to everything, right? And how to make that happen. And in that particular case, it was with biological processes in order to facilitate a bunch of that stuff. So I actually closed that session with a missive to my fellow deans that I said, if you guys have chemical engineering in your universities, and they all do, and you don't have strong synthetic biology and biological practice within that department of chemical engineering, this train is going to leave you at the station. That this is sort of the future of how we're going to think about producing things. The goal is to stop pulling petrochemical stuff out of the ground. Don't pull those hydrocarbons out of the ground when we make carbohydrates, but instead figure out how to take the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen that's already in our biosphere, often known as, plant matter, right? And then turning it into the stuff that we need. And so I think this is, I think we're at a bit of a cusp nationally, scientifically, and certainly from an engineering perspective of being able to do that. And SMARC is one example of that. I'm incredibly proud of all the faculty who've helped make this happen. Some of you know we have some other very large center grant proposals that are involved in essentially this notion of using the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen that are in the biosphere to make other stuff. And I think this represents a tremendous step for McKelvey Engineering in asserting strength in this space. And to all our partners, I think we can't do any of this without all of you. So it's really exciting. And for AI computer science guy to watch this, it's just fundamentally cool. So Marcus, Fuzan, Guy, all of you, again, congratulations on getting this done. And I look forward to hearing more about this just incredibly important work. So welcome here, welcome to McKelvey Engineering, welcome to WashU, and I hope you have a great couple of days. Thanks.
Thank you again, Aaron and Beverly. Okay, so we'd like to start today with just a few opening remarks. I'll start off by just kind of giving a little bit of a rationale for the center. And then, then my colleague Fuzan, who's the technology is a culmination of his for years and years of work in his lab. And so I want to really give him an opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the cutting edge things that he's been able to do as part of the center and also in the lab. SMARC is underpinned by a National Science Foundation, a growing convergence research grant that we're in phase one. So we've had 2 years of that funding. It's also supported by a number of other smaller NSF and DOE grants, some internal grants as well. So we've been able to put together a variety of different funding sources to pull together a really, really great team. And then of course we got additional funding from Dean Bobbitt. So right now our team has a number of researchers here on campus, but then also we have members from Iowa State University, South Florida, and University of South Florida and Northwestern University. And I just want to make sure I acknowledge our team as well. There's the keyboard. It doesn't matter. I have a clicker. I just didn't know what the keyboard was. So as we look at this global map here, you'll notice the patterns of population, particularly global populations, and then also of plastic waste produced. So the size of the circle is the total plastic waste generated, and then the red portion of that circle is the total plastic that is mismanaged or that leaks into our environment. This mismanaged plastic is a critical contributor to the environmental issues that or crisis that we are facing related to plastic pollution in our ecosystems. We tend to see this in our marine life. It can even potentially start to affect human health. We know a lot of microplastics are found in our drinking water, right? So at SMARC, we're not just concerned with this problem, but we also really are interested in driving the solutions to these types of problems. Right, so let's just pivot a little bit to talk about projections of plastic volume growth and their effect potentially on our planet, right? So if we look at this, we'll start to see there's projections that by the year 2050 that we'll see approximately four times as much plastic being produced. And as this leaks out into our environment, so I think we're somewhere around 30% of plastic in our linear cycle. If you think about the linear cycle of a plastic, it leaks into our environment somewhere around in there. And so that means by the year 2050, we'll have more plastic in the ocean than fish, right? This also is related to our consumption of petroleum, something like 15%, 20%, by the year 2050, 20% of the oil production or oil will go into plastic production. And this means that a large chunk of the carbon budget or greenhouse gas emissions will also be then related to that plastic production, right? And then even if we go beyond the kind of environmental concerns, if we think about the ways in which we, in particular, single-use plastics, that carbon, we spend a lot of time and effort, getting that carbon out of the ground, pumping it to some kind of refinery, putting it into a really specific form, and then we go out and we use it one time, and then we throw that away. And if we think about those carbon bonds as having some type of value, with 95% of plastic packaging only with something like 95% of the material value of plastic packaging is lost every year. So we're talking about an order of 80 to 100 billion dollars annually in our economy is lost through this, right? And so these kinds of issues is the things that we think really hard about within SMARC, right? And then, even if we start to look at another really, really interesting industry, which is a textile industry, which contributes a significant amount of global carbon emissions, something like 4 gigatons of CO2 can be associated with the textile industry every year. Typically, we think of these natural fibers as being more eco-friendly, right? They're naturally produced. But if you can just look at this chart, often because of the cultivation and processing that has to go into the production of these natural fibers, they often have substantial carbon footprints. And so SMARC is thinking about how we can utilize, renewable resources and biomanufacturing to make protein-based materials that at least mimic the natural materials that we can produce. But then with the material engineering and material science, are there ways we can improve upon those properties further, right? And so when we start thinking about a new plastics economy, there's a lot of ways that we can start to think about this and address this, and the DOE and a number of other funding agencies have really started to push out a lot of money and have gotten our community really excited about how to try to address this. And so there's a number of ways to do this, but in particular, our center really focuses on how we can leverage photosynthetic, feedstocks. There's some other really great research going on here on campus where people are using electrocatalysis to think about ways of fixing CO2 to produce feedstocks for microbial production as well. Then how we use these kind of bio-based feedstocks to then produce bioplastics that have a lot of value and that can go into a biodegradation cycle. Then lastly here, a little bit about why SMARC. Well, these kind of large, complex, challenging problems, this kind of the plastic pollution and the kind of global carbon emissions that are associated with the production of plastics, it requires perspectives, knowledge, and skills from a large interdisciplinary team. This is one of the few ways that we'll be able to do this. And so with synthetic biology, we're able to control and produce, well-defined or sequence-defined polymer systems, right? We're able to replicate what nature is able to produce. But then the question is, can we redefine or improve upon nature's design? Can we harness the biology's precision to create materials using renewable resources, or that ensures biodegradability at the end of life? All answering these types of questions requires this large team. So of course we need synthetic biologists, but then whether or not these synthetic biologists can interact with material scientists, people who are doing computational design of materials, can we work together? There's a lot of material characterization that has to happen. So whether analytical chemists can play a role here, there's a large design space. If we think about the protein and having a well-defined protein sequence, and that is what determines the properties, then there's an opportunity to have a really large design space and sequence. And so how do we traverse that space? Again, we have computational people to help us with this, but then this brings in our friends in computer science that are doing AI. And then beyond that, even if we can figure out how to produce these materials, we were really like, we really considered, what happened with the mRNA design vaccines for COVID, right? And there was this great technology that people just didn't adopt. And so, to a certain extent, we can also think that, yes, that's something that we could have addressed early on had we thought about this idea of convergence, right? And so we're working with our colleagues, not only to understand kind of the economic and life cycle impacts of our technologies, but also how do we communicate with various stakeholders? How do we understand micro and macroeconomic forces that will affect the technology deployment? How do we actually understand the industries that we want to go into, right? It's not good enough just to say we want to produce textile, but we need people who understand the fashion industry, that understand how those end users and consumers will interact with the kinds of designs that we can come up with. So having this kind of broad team is really important. And I'll just end here with our mission. Our mission at SMARC is to advance the discovery, design, and manufacturing of synthetic biological materials. Our vision involves in transitioning to a widespread use of these bio-derived, biodegradable materials, plastics, bioplastics, from renewable resources, leveraging the power of biotechnology and synthetic biology for material manufacturing. We have some core activities. We're really invested in developing a research ecosystem that leverages all of those different disciplines. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how you do convergence, how you do team science, how you bring together large groups. We are interested in education and outreach. We understand there's a unique workforce that might need to be developed around this biomanufacturing, and also about how do we get the word out about what we're doing. And then of course, innovation ecosystem. So we want to get ahead of the curve, right? We want to work with industry partners to really understand their needs, so that a lot of the research that we're doing is use inspired. And that we start to think about even beforehand how we can start to get some translation of technologies that we have. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague,